We're learning Masechtas Chagiga over the past few months. We're actually getting close to the end. In the beginning letter of the Masechta, the Gemara speaks about the mitzvah, mitzvahs midayraisa, to be oile regel on Yom Tov, the mitzvah of bringing the Churban Chagiga, and the mitzvah of bringing the Shalmei Simcha. We spoke about it. And then the Gemara has a whole bunch of letters speaking about Tuma and Tahara. I would like to focus today's Shiur that's something that connects, that's negeya to both. There's a din, it's actually Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, that a person has to be metar himself beregel, chayiv adam letar atzmei beregel. We'll see the bakoyer and we'll see the reason. And just this morning, another reason popped in why we could say the Shiur, besides that, of course, it's connected to the whole Masechta that we're learning in the morning Kail. Also, we just began now Shovivim, that's in Yoni Tahara. So we'll speak about Al Kapanim being metar oneself beregel. What's the makoyer, the source for somebody to metar himself beregel? Rashi and Parsha Shmini on the Pasuk speaking about the behemoths, tameis that you're not allowed to eat. On the Pasuk, a chazer you're not allowed to eat. So the Pasuk says, not only are you not allowed to eat the chazer, says the Pasuk, uvinevlosam loisi go. You're not supposed to touch the nevela. Meaning to say, why? Because if you touch the nevela, you're going to become tummy. So what's the problem to touch the nevela and become tummy? Rashi explains and asks from Chazal, a kohen is not allowed to become tummy. The parasha over here is speaking to all of Klal Yisrael. So what's the problem for anybody in Klal Yisrael to touch a nevela? You touch a nevela, you become tummy, you go to the mikvah and you're tar. Or you don't go to the mikvah and you're not tar. And if you're not tar, you can't eat, you're not tar. So what's the problem? So Rashi says, in the name of Chazal, it's not talking about a kohen because the parsha is talking about everybody. Elamai, it's talking about everybody and it's talking about a specific time. It's talking about Yom Tov. Mekan shechayiv adam letar atzmai beregel. Rabbi Yitzchak. A person has to make himself tar. On top of that, which is hainu hach, the Torah says alav. You're not allowed to make yourself tummy. It's alav. It's isser for anybody in Klal Yisrael to make yourself tummy. And if somebody's tummy, chayiv adam letar has to make himself tar. However it is, if he's a tumah that requires a mikvah, he goes to the mikvah. If he's tamei meis, he has to have hazah to make himself tar from the para aduma. So very crystal clear, the Torah says, "Ubin v'lasam leisugo." It's an isser for a person to become tamei before Yom Tov, and therefore, not therefore, a person has to make himself tar. A person has to make himself tar. And if he's tamei, he has to make himself tar, and you're not allowed to make yourself tamei. The Lashon HaRambam, the Rambam says, Kol Yisrael muzharim, liyos tahirim beregel. In other words, just to be clear, when the Torah says the isser of becoming tamei, you could have learned that it's just the isser to become tamei, like a kohen has the isser to become tamei. That's all. There's a din that a kohen should be tar. There's no din that a kohen should be tar. A kohen is not allowed to make himself tamei. That's not the din for every yid before Yom Tov. It's not a din that you're not allowed to make yourself tamei. The din is that you have to be tar Yom Tov. Connected to that is if you need to be tar, you're not allowed to make yourself tamei. A kohen that's not the case by a kohen. By a kohen, it's not that he has to be tar. A kohen is not allowed to be metame himself. Here, the isser is not just stam. You're not allowed to be metame yourself. Of course, you're not allowed to. But the reason why you're not allowed to be metame yourself is because you're supposed to be tar in Yom Tov. We'll soon see why. Just to illustrate it, this is important understanding. To illustrate, a kohen that's tummy already. which is that's the case for Zman Hazeh, every Kohen. A Kohen, is he allowed to make himself Tommy again? Which is Negeya. Is a Kohen allowed to go to a Beis HaKfaros? He's allowed to go to a Kaver. He's Tommy already. If the Isser would be just that you should be Tar, like we're saying every Yid on Yom Tov, it should be Tar, so then he's not Tar anymore. But the Isser, the Shagasari and Achadoshas, he speaks about it and he concludes that a Kohen that's Tommy is not allowed to make himself Tommy again, because by a Kohen, the Isser is for the Kohen to be Matami himself. Even if he's Tommy already, he's not allowed to do a Maisa that's Matami himself. Here, in Hilchas Yom Tov of a Klal Yisrael, the Isser, Avada is the Isser to become Tommy. But the Isser is all based because of the din that a person is supposed to be Tar. So before moving on, it's very clear there's a din, Chayv Adam Latar Satzma Beregel. What's the reason? So I went a little bit longer just to have the anchored very clearly. There's a din in the Torah that a person is supposed to be Tar Yom Tov. What is the reason? Why should a person be Tar? And again, if a person became Tamei, you have to be Matar yourself. Of course, you're not allowed to make yourself Tamei. If you make yourself Tamei, then you're not Tar. But you have to be Tar. And if you're Tamei, make yourself Tar. Why? So the Shagas Ari says the reason why you have to be Tar, HaBayis is a mitzvah in the Torah of Aliyah L'Regel, like we learned in the beginning of the Masechta, and we spoke about it. Is a mitzvah to go be Oile Regel to the Beis HaMikdash. And if a person's Tamei, he can't be Oile Regel. He can't go to the Beis HaMikdash. So that's why the Torah says to be Tar. Again, if in a blossom lacy go, don't make yourself Tamei, because then you can't go to the Beis HaMikdash. And even if you're Tamei already from 3 months ago, there's a din to make yourself Tar so you can be Oile Regel. What the Shagas Ari says, he says in Mefurish in the Rambam and the Rishonim. The Rambam, the Lashon HaRambam, we mentioned it before that the Rambam says Kol Yisrael Mizharm Liyastahirim. The din is to be Tar. Why? Says the Rambam. The Rambam himself says the reason. A person should be prepared to be able to go into the Beis HaMikdash. So that's the reason. The reason why a person has to be Tar and Yom Tov is able to be Oile Regel. The Shagasari in a different siman is Merchiach. He has a proof to say that the reason why you're not allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash, why you're not allowed to be, you have to be Tar, not to Matami yourself, is to be able to go into the Beis HaMikdash. He says, because really, what's the Makoyer of Chazal? Mekan shechayiv adam l'tar atzim regel. The Torah only says not to become Tomei. The Torah never says that there's a din to become Tar, to go to the mikveh, to have Efer Para Aduma. The Teretz is, so what? How do we know? The Torah just says don't touch an Aveil and become Tamei. But who said if you're Tamei already that you have to retire yourself? The Teretz is the reason why not to become Tamei in the Torah Akdosh of an Avlasam Leis to go is to be able to be Oile Regel. Oibazoi, if you're Tamei, you have to become Tar also. Are you with me? How do we know this din Amr of Yitzchak Mekan that you have to make yourself Tar? Who said that you have to make yourself Tar? Maybe just that you're not allowed to make yourself Tamei, like the Torah says, when I've lost a life to go. The Torah is the reason why not to become Tamei, says the Shagasai, is like what I'm saying, to be able to be Oile Regel. So if you're Tamei already, obviously make yourself Tar to be able to be Oile Regel. Being that the reason why a person has to be Tar for Yom Tov is to be able to be Oile Regel, explains the Shagasari. That's the Pshan of the Rambam. The Rambam says that this that the Torah says when you've lost some place you go. What happens if a person makes himself Tamei? The Pashtus you would understand that the person's Loika, he gets Malchus. It's a lav. So why does the Rambam say Einoi Loika? You should get Malchus on such a thing. The Torah says if a person should not make himself Tamei. So if a person is over on what the Torah says, he should get malchus. Says the Shagasaria, HaBayis, the whole lav is only to enable you to be able to be oile regel, because if you're going to be tamei, you're not going to be able to be oile regel. The whole not being oile regel, do you get malchus? If somebody's not oile regel, does he get malchus? No, he's over nasei. So this preparation, don't make yourself tamei to be able to be oile regel, can't be worse off that you should get malchus. HaBayis, the whole reason in the Torah of not becoming tamei is to be able to be oile regel, and oile regel, if you're not oile regel, you don't get malchus. So if you become tamei now you can't be oile regel, you also don't get malchus. So what do we have so far? Very clear. Very clear. The Torah says, don't become tamei on Yom Tif. That's clear. From that we know that not only you're not allowed to become tamei, he's a din to become tar. Even if it was a little confusing, the haichachas before, but what's very clear? You're not allowed to become tamei. If you are tamei, you have to be matar yourself. That's a given, that's crystal clear. Why do you have to be tar on Yom Tif? So far we have the Shagasaria, and it's befurish already in the Rambam. The reason why a person has to be matar himself in Yom Tif to be able to be oile regel.
You should get malchus for the philosopher.
What'd you say?
When do you get malchus?
You do not. There's no malchus. Interesting enough, even though it's a lav, if a person makes himself tamei on Yom Tif or right before Yom Tif, he's over in a lav. Clear. But there's no malchus. The Rambam says no malchus. And the Shagasari says, you know why there's no malchus? Because it's all built on being oile regel. Oile regel, there's no malchus. So then the preparation for that, the issa to enable you to be able to be oile regel, also can't be malchus. Being that the reason to be tar on Yom Tov is to be oile regel, to be able to be oile regel, Rabbi say, listen, these two nafkaminas. Number one, this din of chayiv adam l'tar is only shalosh regalim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos. What's about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Do you have to be tar before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? No. The reason why you have to be tar, the Torah tells us to be tar. If the reason is to be oile regel, so Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you don't have to be tar. The Shagasai himself says it. That's nafkamina number one. Number two, bizman hazeh. Is there a din to be matar yourself? Let's call it go to the mikveh to make yourself tar bizman hazeh.
I would think not, because you wouldn't be able to, if we were over regel bizman hazeh, going to the mikveh wouldn't do anything for you.
Oh, very good, Neshulam, very good. So you're saying that it anyway is not relevant because you could go to the mikveh from today till tomorrow, we're all tamei meis. What's if, let's say, we have the Efer of the Parah Aduma? The Gemara says that you Amoraim that had it even after the Churban HaBayis. Let's say we could be matar ourselves. Then would the Yeh be a din to matar atzmai? L'maisa not, because there's no din of aliyah l'regel. So HaBayis, the whole reason to be tar is to be oile regel. So even if you lose, so you could be matar yourself. There's still no din to be matar yourself, because the whole reason to be matar is only to be oile regel. So the reason that it's to be oile regel, number one, you don't have to matar yourself Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And number two, bizman hazeh, even if you would have a way to be able to matar yourself, it wouldn't be negeya, it wouldn't be necessary. It wouldn't be necessary. Why? Because there's no aliyah l'regel. That's reason number one. Reason number two, why to be matar yourself the regel, the svasemis. The svasemis says, even without being oile regel, a person has to matar himself. What's his proof? He says, you can't tell me that a person has to matar himself because of this pasuk of v'nivlasam not to become tamei loisi go. That the reason is for aliyah l'regel. You know why you have to be tar for aliyah l'regel? Because the Torah says to be oil regel, and if you're tameh, you're not going to be able to be oil regel. So Mela al karchach, you have to make yourself tar. The reason is not because the Torah says don't make yourself tameh, make yourself tar. Up until now, we understood it. Torah says, don't make yourself tameh, make yourself tar, and we're saying a reason for oil regel. If the Torah says to be oil regel, do whatever you have to do to be able to be oil regel. Don't make yourself tameh, make yourself tar. So the Sfas Emes says that's not the reason. Everything we spoke now for the past 10 minutes, the reason why you have to be tar is to be oil regel, says the Sfas Emes. Of course, that's 100% true, but that's not what the Torah is coming to say here in Parashat Shmini. So what's Yed Pshat? He doesn't say what's Yed Pshat. What's Taka Pshat? Why do you have to matar yourself? The Prisha in Siman Reish Mem Aleph. The Prisha, Siman Reish Mem Aleph, the Torah speaks about if a person has to go to the mikveh for Tumas Keri, relevant b'noigeya to daven to learn Takanas Ezra. We spoke about this over here when we learned Masechtas Brachas, and the Torah says that Takanas Ezra is not noig b'zman hazeh. In other words, even if a person is tamei b'tumas keri, he could still daven, he could still learn. Lashon HaTorah, it's not noig. Vanika Safti L'mayla, says the Torah, she'ein tzarech loy tvila v'loy rechitza. Though the Torah does say v'amachmet harvei alav bracha, but the Torah says a person can daven even if he doesn't go to the mikveh, he can learn. Says the Prisha, ulam b'regel yamt, if a person does have to, because chayav adam l'tar atzma b'regel. In other words, this is another reason why a person should have to matar himself. The Tumas Keri.
Nowadays, or
so we'll get to that in a second. Obviously, the Prisha is talking about Bazman Hazeh, but we'll get to it in a second if it's really going to help. But the Prisha is for sure talking Bazman Hazeh, and what the Torah says, La halacha, that you don't have to go, says the Prisha. However, before Yom Tov, you do have to. We'll get to it, Lamaisa, very good. So the pashtus is, this is a davar pasha, that it means before Yom Tov to be able to, let's say for oil regel, or if we're learning now, the reason is to be tar, as we'll see again, we'll see soon a lashon in the Rishonim, to be tar. So regardless, it's to come into Yom Tov tar, either to be tar Yom Tov.
Morning as well.
If
the preacher is saying this about the Edger and Al Tefillah and saying Al Yom Tov, also maybe it's Yom Tov morning as well.
Well, here's the thing like this: if it's out the davening shaboy, so then that's Takanas Ezra, not to daven when a person's Tommy Bakari, and that the Torah says ve'ein ad noigim. But what is the preacher saying? Preacher Al Yom Tov. Yeah, but no, I think Al Yom Tov itself. In other words, for davening you don't have to do it, but for Yom Tov chayav adam l'tar, which l'chayr means the reason why a person should matar himself is for Yom Tov itself, to come into Yom Tov tar. Agav, a person might say that so l'chayr, then a person should l'tar atzmai only if he knows he's tamei bekari. What's if he's not? We'll get to this hopefully at the end, but in Hilchos Yom Kippur, the din is l'maisa, we go to the mikveh mepnei Tumas Keri, and the Mishnah Berurah brings over there that even if a person's not tamei, shema raw, and he didn't know. But al kapanim, that's reason number 2 to be tar b'Yom Tov. To be tar. But feed this din of the Sfas Emes, understanding why a person has to be tar, is to be tar mituma, not because of aliyah l'regel. Pasha to be tar, to come into Yom Tov tar. Well, Yeah, you brought up a good point. Is it negay bezman? I will get to it in a minute because we just said in the Shagasari two nafgaminos that bezman said it's not knowing. But let's see in a minute. The Turei Even asks the following question. Rashi in Yevamah says that this bit of chayiv adam letar atzmai beregel, a person has to letar himself at Yom Tif, is relevant to ladies as well. So Rashi. Frek the Turei Even. The reason why you have to letar yourself is why to be able to be oile regel. As we learned in the beginning in the Masechta, ladies and amachuyev and aliyah regel. So why is it that chayiv adam letar, ladies are not mechuyev to aliyah regel, so they shouldn't have to be matar themselves? But if you learn like this Svasemis, that the chayiv to be tar has nothing to do with aliyah regel, the reason is just to be tar. The reason is to be tar. So then it's a din on nashim as well, also to be tar. So lefi this you cite in the Svasemis that has nothing to do with aliyah regel. It's to be tahor Yom Tif. What's about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur also. Lefi the Shagasari, it's aliyah regel. It's only the Gimel Regal. It's the Chiv aliyah regel. What's about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? See, this Svasemis, there would be a din on Rosh Hashanah to go before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as well. The lashon of the Shibali Alakat from the Rishonim, Holamadata. What'd you say?
What isn't the lashon of the preacher regel? The lashon of the preacher.
And therefore,
Is regel or Yom Tif?
But you're saying because maybe Rosh Hashanah and Kippur is not considered regel.
Not considered regel.
So really, you're saying the lashon of the preacher, the lashon of Amar of Yitzchak, shechayiv adam latar atzmai beregel. So you're saying maybe regel should l'chayru mean shalosh regalim. Lamaisa, I hear. Lamaisa, the lashon in the Shibali Aleket, holamadata, shebachol regel beregel. But regel again maybe just means the gimel regalim. Chayiv adam latar atzmai. Says the Shibali Aleket, kol shkein b'Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippur. Meaning to say is, I like what you're pointing out. Regel could be taka means only gimel regalim. But if the reason what we just said is pasha to be tar and Yom Tif, says the Shibali Aleket, kol shkein Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, shehin yemei mishpat shetzarach adam letar ulekadosh atzmai ulehoitzi ka'orit sitkei mishpat. To be matar yourself, to be zoiche badin. So Lefida Svasemis, yes, a person is supposed to be matar himself before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. What's about B'zman Hazeh? What's about?
It seems B'zman Hazeh people are more, according to the Sufim, the Shalosh Regalim seem to be more chashuv in terms of mikvah. But B'zman Hazeh we're more machshiv Hashem Yom Kippur.
More than the Shalosh Regalim. Good. Let's see if we get to the end. We'll see why Lemaisu we go before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We'll get to that momentarily. Be'ezus Hashem. So Lefi, very good, brought out, very good. Lefi is Svasemis that the reason is to be tahar. So we said Erev Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur also. What's about B'zman Hazeh? Now, Lemaisa, a person can't become tahar B'zman Hazeh because we don't have Efer Para. But let's say we would have Efer Para. Even B'zman Hazeh, you should make yourself tar. Nothing to do with aliyah regel, pasha to be tar. Now, we don't have Efer Para, and therefore we can't become tar the Thomas Mace. But Lamaisa, like my Chashav Charusa brought out, that Lamaisa, what the priest is talking about B'zman Hazeh to become tar the Thomas Kari. Very interesting. Rabbi Moshe Sternbach in Mayadam Zmanim declares this shaila. We're learning Kilchas Tomat Tara, so this is a Tomat Tara shaila. Could a person that's Tamei Mace become Tahar the Thomas Kari? What's the shaila? If a person has two Thomas, could a person take away one Toma and when he still has the other Toma? Now, you're going to tell me, what do you mean? you see by Takanas Ezra that Ezra said to be toivel, to become tar metumas keri. So that he says, Takanas Ezra was just that legave davening and learning. What was Takanas Ezra? Shlayim mitsuye yisel shesem katarnago. So he made the Takana that you have to go to the mikvah, meaning to say that for this of davening and learning, you become tar. But could be still tamei. Meaning to say, does it help bizman hazeh that we're tamei mace, but does it help to go to the mikveh to become tar mikeri? He brings for a Chaim Soloveitchik that says that it depends. If someone's tamei betuma kal or betuma chamura, two tumas, you can remove the tuma chamura and still stay with the tuma kal. But the opposite, you can't take away the kal, the more light tuma, when you still have the tuma chamura. It depends. When a person has two tumas, you can take away the one that's more chamer, that's a more intense tuma. So the pashtus, we would think that what's considered the tuma chamura. What'd it say?
How would she be able to?
Interesting. I hear the shayla. Okay, so 1 second. Let's just see. Is it Toma Chamura good? Interesting. In the gay asked by Thomas Carey, but you're asking also Thomas Nida also that we see taka that you become tar. Lamaisa, who said that she becomes taka tar? It's only, this is a shmuz for itself, a whole shmuz, but it's only. The din is really for tomatara, to eat kachem. Lamaisa, we will machmer even lagabe lebaleim. It's a separate discussion. Lamaisa, Reb Chaim says you can only remove the toma chamura, not the toma kal. So maybe over here, Thomas Kerry, Pashas is a toma kal because you just go to the mikvah. But Lamaisa says, Kobi, it's not called toma kal because Kerry, a person's mishtaleach b'shtei machnes, so it has Scheiner also. So he's unsure.
More Megillah on that says they can't go. The dog can't go to the mikvah. The dog like Tzaras can't go to the mikvah until his Tzaras is healed. Even though he can count as Zayin Nikim, but he can't go to the mikvah until his Tzaras is healed. You see, it can't be far from one without.
What's the ba'ayin taka? What's the din? Is it an isolated din dafka and hilchas mitzayra that you can't go? Could be it's a din dafka over here. So you want to know if it's a din of klal all over? I don't know. So what do we have over here so far? These are din min ha-Torah to be tar on Yom Tov, either to be able to be oile regel, or these are din to be tar on Yom Tov, so you should be tar. We saw nafkamino Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We saw nafkamino Zman Hazeh. Could be for both reasons. It's not noyik b'zman hazeh. The Ramban al Torah, when bringing this din, the Ramban says it's only a din with the Rabbanan. Even if also likes to go with a drasha, chayv adam letar, it's a smachta ba'alma. It's only with the Rabbanan. It's only with the Rabbanan. So what we said till now, it's a isser, it's a lav, maybe einoi loika. The Ramban says no, it's only with the Rabbanan. So let's try to conclude the shiur with what is bizman hazeh. What's l'maisa bizman hazeh? If it's aliyah l'regel, it's for sure not negeya. If it's to be tar, is there a din bizman hazeh? We saw in the pre-shur that is there a din bizman hazeh? So l'maisa in the Rasag, Reb Sadia going from the Goinim. In other Rishonim, they say that it's a chiyuv b'zman hazeh. It's a chiyuv b'zman hazeh. And the raya is Rabbi Yitzchak chayv adam l'tar atzvei b'regel, talking about b'zman hazeh. He's a chiyuv. He's a chiyuv. So I want to ask you, is there a chiyuv? You look in the Rambam. The Rambam doesn't say there's a chiyuv b'zman hazeh. You look in the Shulchan Aruch, doesn't say there's a chiyuv b'zman hazeh. Not shalosh regalim. Not Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Sorry, maybe Yom Kippur, we'll see, we'll get to that. But Al Kapan Shalosh Regalim, for sure it's not brought la halacha. Beis Shmuel in Even Ezer, the Beis Shmuel, I'm going to say it very bekitzer, how the Pischei Tshuva understands the Beis Shmuel, that it's noyig bizman hazeh, that tzlach, after big arichas, the tzlach says it's noyig bizman hazeh. So, is there a din to go to the mikvah to matar yourself before Yom Tif? And then we'll get to Mishul, what you pointed out, that people are more makbid Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Yom Tif, is there a din? Interesting, it's brought in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says to go. The Mishnah Berurah in Hilchas Birchas Kahanim, that a kohen, the Birchas Kahanim, b'nei chutz la'aretz, not the svardim, only duchen on Yom Tif. So the Mishnah Berurah brings, the Chaim says to go to the mikvah. Says the Chavetz Chaim, the gam belav hachi, even without that you're a kohen, sarich adam litar beregel. Sarich would seem that he's a chiv. The Mishnah Berurah brings it to matar yourself beregel. The same also the Mishnah Berurah brings in Hilchas Pesach, Siman Tafai and Aleph. There it seems more like a hanhaga to go to the mikvah. So these are the sources to go to the mikvah in halach in the Chavetz Chaim. It's already brought early, but what's the reason? Why? You can't be oile regel, and maybe also you can't make yourself tar also, maybe. Because Lamaisa person, maybe only from Kerry, but for sure a person's tamei meis, so you can't be with tar yourself. If you remember the beginning of the Shiur, we said the din is not to be matame yourself. The din is that you should be tar. So when you go to the mikvah from today till tomorrow, you're not making yourself tar. The Chaya Adam in a sefer, not in a sefer, the Chaya Adam on in Hilchas Yom Tif, just want to quote the Lashon. Din Erev Yom Tif ke Erev Shabbos l'chol davar, says the Chaya Adam, v'roi l'chol Adam litvol atzmai be'erev Yom Tif zeichel hamikdash. First of all, it's roi, and why should a person go to the mikvah on Erev Yom Tov? Zeicher lemigdash. The reason is to be oile regel, to remember that when there was a Beis Hamikdash, we batar ourselves to be oile regel, a zeicher. Now I just want to conclude with another minute. I apologize that it's past 8 o'clock, but what we have so far is that bezman hazeh, the din that we spoke this whole morning about Chayiv Adam L'Taher, says the Chayiv Adam, Roy L'Chol Adam, to go to the mikveh Erev Yom Tif, Zeicher to when there was a Beis Hamikdash to be Oile Regel. L'maisa, just to conclude, and it's important, though this is not the din of Chayiv Adam L'Taher, but like Meshulam mentioned before, L'maisa, as much as people go all the time, but people go less Yom Tif as opposed to before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. L'maisa, the din before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is brought in halacha in the Shulchan Aruch. That's why people are more makbid. In Hilchas Rosh Hashanah, Siman Tavkuf Pei Aleph, at the end of the Siman, the Ramah says that a person should be metar himself. Why? Metar himself with Tumas Keri. Why? The Pnei Tefillah. And the same thing is also in Yom Kippur also. To metar himself with Tumas Keri, weiter. The same thing also. There's another reason with Pnei Tshuva. But this is all uniquely connected to the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. A person's davening the whole Rosh Hashanah, the whole Yom Kippur. A person should metar himself because he's davening. So I don't know what we mentioned before, if maybe a person can't really be metar himself, but at least like what we mentioned, if a person can remove his Tumas Keri at least for davening. And if a person's in shul, Rosh Hashanah half the day, Yom Kippur the whole day, he should be metar himself. And finally, to conclude, it's Erev Shabbos, and we spoke about Regel. There are people that go also Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tov, Erev Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Erev Shabbos. So the Chayei Adam in a sefer, Zichru Toras Moshe, he says, Oz bevadei la'achar shel toval be'erev Shabbos be'kavana. Then he goes on. So he brings over there to be toval erev Shabbos. It's interesting the Mishnah Berurah and Hilchas Shabbos, as far as I know, doesn't bring to go to the mikveh. Where it is brought in Hilchas in the 9 days, the Mishnah Berurah says that we don't go to the mikveh, but somebody that goes every Erev Shabbos could go also on the 9 days. So the din of Chayav Adam L'Tar B'Regel, which we spoke about, that's something for the Gimel Regalim. L'Fidas Rasamis' reason, it's Negeya also Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Even if we say that this is all not Negeya, the Ramah says that we go Sayer Rosh Hashanah, Sayer Yom Kippur, and then on top of that is brought to go also Erev Shabbos. Have a wonderful Shabbos.